If you followed this channel for any length of time, you've probably noticed that I don't really talk that much about politics on this channel. Sometimes it does come up, but it's not really a topic that I talk about frequently. Now, you can probably assume that I like firearms, but a bulk of what I really like and own is like this Carcano that's well over 100 years old. It's stuff I like because of the history it represents, and not necessarily for other reasons. Now, that is not necessarily meant to be inferred as a political statement, but just as a matter of fact. I wish they weren't, but firearms are a very political topic in the United States that there are YouTube channels entirely devoted to talking about the politics of, and those channels do great things. They give really good commentary on firearms. However, that's just not what my channel is. My channel is kind of meant to be a break from that, and it's meant to be talking about history and mechanics and design and things like that. Now, I am passionate about old guns, but what I'm passionate about far more than old guns is people. It's what I do for my career, and it's why I actually make videos like this in the first place. It's because I care about you guys and I want to help people, and because it's something I enjoy talking about. Now, that kind of brings us to the topic of today's video, which is, can I still be friends with people who disagree with me about guns? And I'm going to try and stay relatively neutral in this video so that it could be applicable for somebody on either side. Now, I went to visit some loved ones over the past weekend, and given all of the recent events that we've seen, we had some interesting conversations surrounding those events. And I had conversations that were kind of on opposite sides of the spectrum. Now, one of the things that did come up in conversation was the fact that police legally don't have a duty or responsibility to protect you. And that one of the things we saw recently was police fail to do so. Now, we're not going to talk too much into that conversation. However, it is basically unanimously decided that the inaction of the police was a failure on their part to protect the lives of people. Now, one of these loved ones that I was with had, I think, a pretty reasonable reaction to that. And that was, this person has their carry permit. However, they hadn't been carrying because the carry handgun that they had was big and uncomfortable. However, when we were going to a different location later that day, this person grabbed their carry gun and they were loading it up and putting it in their holster, making sure everything still worked like it was supposed to. And when we were having that conversation, the person said, and I'm going to try and get this quote right, something like, "We're going to be going into this place with 4 kids, and I want to make sure that we leave with 4 kids." Now, I think that that is a really responsible and well thought out approach to the situations that we saw over the last few days. One of the things that this person saw was the police's lack of responsibility for their own life and for the life of their family, and so they took that into their own hands. Now, I'd like to talk about another response I've seen as well on social media from friends of mine and just from individual conversations I've had with people, and that is, how come an 18-year-old crazy person was able to go into a gun store and leave with a firearm? How come there weren't more checks than that? How come somebody so young was able to do that? Many other different questions like that. Now, I'm not saying I support that type of legislation. However, I do think those are somewhat reasonable questions, especially for people who just don't know that much about guns. For actually quite a while, people have been saying things like, my kids saw this on the news, and they're asking me if their school is safe, and I just don't know how to answer that question. Or maybe it's because these people are teachers and they're worried about their classrooms. Or maybe people are just worried about sporting events or grocery stores or any number of different things. And, you know, I have my own personal beliefs about what those people should do if they are feeling that way. But regardless of that, I think a reasonable response is, why are people able to get this stuff? Now, you'll notice some common trends in these two responses, even though they are radically different. They're about protecting kids. They're about protecting people. They're about not wanting people to die at the hand of a crazy person. One person is saying, no, I'm going to take this into my own hands because obviously we've seen that other people are not going to protect you. You have to do it yourself. The other side is saying, well, how come this is something we need to fear anyway? We should do something about it on a legislative level. And I think this sparks 2 questions for people. The first one is, can I be friends with people who disagree with me about guns? I mean, these are people's lives that we're talking about. And the second question is, how can I be friends with people who disagree with me about guns? These are people's lives we're talking about. Let's talk about that first question first. I'm going to say that not only can you be friends with people who disagree with you about guns, but actually you have to. And this is kind of coming from two practical things. First of all, if every conversation that you go up to, you start with, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. What do you think about firearms?" Nobody's going to want to be your friend. You really just need to form friendships and get to know people. And as that happens, you're going to learn that they agree with you about some things and disagree with you about other things. And the second reason is you just can't go through life separating away from everybody who disagrees with you about anything. I've also noticed that people who go through life and try to do this are both a lot more lonely and a lot less happy than people who are just resolved to the fact that they are going to be friends with people who disagree with them about very, very important things. We have to be friends with people who disagree with us about important issues. But here's how we do it. I think the first step is to give people the benefit of the doubt. Now, I know this sounds crazy, and I want to be clear, I'm not talking about politicians. I'm talking about your neighbors and your friends and your family members. Understand that they probably want the same things as you. They just don't disagree about how to achieve them. I hear a lot of anti-gun people say that pro-gun people believe what they believe because they think their AR-15 is more important than children's lives, or, even worse, that they want kids to be killed in schools. But I have never met a conservative who actually thinks this. Usually, these people think something like, gun control simply won't work. On the flip side, though, I have heard a number of conservatives say that liberals want to take guns because the next thing they want to do is lock them in concentration camps for having different beliefs. I have met very few liberals, I've never met one personally, who would actually say something like this. This just isn't something that really real people think. Both sides want to protect kids. So what this means for people who support gun control is that for people who own guns, tragedies are just as much of tragedies as they are for anybody else. We aren't happy about it, we hate it. We might just disagree with you about what your proposed policy would actually do. On the flip side, though, a lot of gun owners need to understand that the people who might want to take guns or take certain guns or add more strict background checks or something like that don't want to see you locked in some sort of camp necessarily. They probably just think that their solution will stop kids from being killed. We need to understand that we probably want the same things. Going along with this, we need to be both intelligent and humble about our position and the other side's position. Ultimately, where crazy ideas like gun owners want kids to be killed in schools comes from is a lack of humility and a lack of understanding of the other side's position. You should be able to clearly articulate your own position, and when somebody argues with you about your position, you should be able to understand their position better than they can. Not only is this a good idea if you want to be able to change others' minds on things, but it also just helps you have a better understanding of where these people come from. It gives you the ability to show more compassion, show more love, and show more care for them. I remember a conversation I was having online with somebody once about gun legislation, and the person I was talking to, actually his daughter had survived a school shooting, and so I can understand why he would come at this from a different perspective and different angle than I might, who has never been through anything like that. The next thing is you need to be willing to discuss or not discuss where you come from on a certain issue. Like I said, you should be able to clearly articulate what you believe. You should also be willing to have that conversation with people. If you own guns and you maybe post a picture of something like this on social media, and somebody messages you saying, "Hey, why do you have that? Why do you think you should be able to have that?" You should be willing to talk to them back. However, you also should be willing to not have discussions about that. I have friends who, a few times in the past, guns have come up in conversation and we've talked about it, and it was pretty clear that they just weren't comfortable talking about it. And so, with those people, I don't anymore. It's not something that they want to talk about, and I don't see the need to make every opportunity a time to discuss that. Some people can't talk about those things without getting incredibly emotional, and some people just don't like to talk about it. They just don't care. Now, one of my favorite podcasts is the Words and Numbers podcast, and so for my last point, I'm going to take one from James Harrigan, one of the co-hosts. Be nice to each other. Don't be a jerk. So, as an example of this, some of those friends who weren't really too interested in guns came over to my house one time, and I live in a pretty small one-bedroom apartment, and so because of that, this studio is just right in my living room. And so I have ammunition laying around. Sometimes I have like a gun on the backdrop like this. Before these people came over, I just put all that stuff away because I don't want to bother them. I don't want to disturb them. And ultimately, what's most important to me is that these people feel comfortable in my home. Now, that doesn't mean that I went out of my way to take this whole studio down. I did leave things up. However, I just put guns and ammunition away. And then when they asked about it, I explained, well, I make a YouTube channel in some of my free time, and that's my studio. And then when they asked what I talk about, I said old guns. They probably know where I stand on those things, and I basically know where they stand on those things, and that's okay. So the TLDR of this video is, yes, you can be friends with people who disagree with you about guns and other important topics as well. The keys to doing that is giving the individual in front of you the benefit of the doubt, being able to clearly articulate both your point and their point, knowing when to have those conversations and when not to have them, and just not being a jerk. This is one of those videos that when I make it, I don't know if anybody's really going to watch it, but I hope it has been interesting and informative for you, and I hope that you can show more humility and kindness when you talk to your anti-gun or pro-gun friends in the future because you've watched it. All right, I'll see you guys later.